Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We don't have a lot of time, so we definitely want to allow our speakers to share what they need to share and let you hear their background story on how their family have lived and how they're living today. And so one of the things we will ask everybody to continue to have yourself muted, of course, and then we are recording. So we want to make sure everyone understands that we are recording this session. We may run out of time, so you may not have enough time for a Q&A, but we will be having a follow-up session on March 31st. It's the NCAT's weekly Wednesday workshop with these same speakers. And they will be continuing the conversation, and you can ask as many questions as you like at that time. So our first speaker will be Kelsey Scott, and I will ask Kelsey to introduce herself, give a little backstory, and move right into your presentation. Kelsey?
Thank you. I'm Patiwashte. Good day. Tatea akwalui lakotia imachiapi na Kelsey Ducheneaux-Scott. Washidria imachiapi. My Lakota name is Soft Little Breeze Woman, and my English name is Kelsey Ducheneaux-Scott. I am the Director of Programs for the Intertribal Agriculture Council. And it's a pleasure to be here virtually today. If there's one thing I've learned since March of 2020 is that panel discussions in the Zoom world are even a little more intimidating. So what I really hope to kick off today's conversation with is a focus on the concept of regenerative agriculture and what that looks like or means for Indigenous communities of this continent. For most of us, it's a reconnection to our foodways. So this is typically when I would do the Q&A and people would shout out guesses as to what this map is. Right there is where I'm from, and all of the gray areas on this map show Indian country today. It's a map of the reservations of tribal lands across the United States. And I've highlighted for you all again where I live. The Cheyenne River Sioux Indian Reservation is one of those really dark red spots right there. And I would ask, who knows what this map is? And somebody would probably say, it is a map of the USDA food deserts. Now, who knows what this map is, right? This is 1492 Indian country. So when we look at this map, it looks identical, same colors, same places, to regenerative ag production in the US, to successful local food systems in the US, to successful farm to school food systems, and to quality governance structures that were already in place that oversaw all of the food production and distribution across the continent. Now, why is that important? I think it's really important because it reminds us that regenerative agriculture is not just the new sexy thing to be talking about in the world of the industry. It is actually a rematriation with the practices that this continent evolved alongside. There are Indigenous land stewards that are current descendants of those original land stewards from millennia ago. And these Indigenous communities are doing some just phenomenal things to reinvigorate that conversation and to continue to share it across their community. And what we're not necessarily seeing across the spectrum of the conversation of regenerative ag is an uplifting of those voices. And so one of the things that I love that I get to do with my work at the Intertribal Ag Council is to kind of highlight some of this. So when we consider how exactly was that big blue continent managed, or that country outline managed pre-1492, well, we had Indigenous communities that were seed keepers, breeders, and pollinators. There are phenomenal stories of our cultural teachings that talk about when the plants above ground would bloom, which is directly related to the soil health below ground. It would be an indication that it was time for us to return to our planted farming sites because the crops were ready. You know, we had these indications and indicating factors across the landscape that we were able to listen to, and we knew that there was a picture above ground and a picture below ground, and we were only able to visibly see what's above ground, but that was reflective of the health below ground. We were carbon and nutrient managers. There are so many stories of Indigenous peoples all across the country that were doing the modern day practice of prescribed burning. The Great Plains tribal peoples would utilize burn patches to reduce litter load so that when the next season or the summer and spring rainstorms would come by, they wouldn't start a prairie fire. But also because when you get rid of that litter off of the surface of the soil, and when you do it within the right conditions, you're going to trigger that regrowth, which is going to attract the bison the following year. So it localizes their food for them. Similarly, in the communities outside of the Great Plains, where there's a lot more tree and shrub, the brush cleaning that took place by our Indigenous populations was instrumental in keeping our ecosystems functioning. And now we see such a degraded pattern of this litter and nutrient cycling that we face massive wildfires that are encroaching upon our communities. And when we are not proactive in establishing the destruction of that litter load or the recycling of that litter load, it is a reaction to the destruction of our communities, both human and animal and wildlife and plant communities. So one of the things that I just really like to talk about is the importance of that carbon and nutrient management. We cannot just let a piece of land sit or expect it to be able to maintain itself. We as humans have to have a very engaged and involved experience in managing that load. And as far as the nutrients go, you know, we have extraordinary stories of composting within Indigenous communities, as well as in our songs and in our teachings. We talk about, you know, using the fish emulsion in our garden. You know, we knew about the nutrient value of so many current considered waste products that we actually worked into the land to replenish Mother Earth as we took from her. We were herdsmen and women. We were the stockmen of the bison, the stockmen of the different herds of wildlife that roamed across the landscape. And we knew the importance of managing not for trophies to hang on our wall, but managing for the quality of the population that existed out there. Because if we're not contributing to a healthy harvest of the populations that exist, we're contributing to a degraded quality of a population that will be available to be breed for the generations to come. Foragers and planters, right? So not only were we very cognizant of the need to harvest from the land for our own medicinal and nutritional purposes, but we knew that this needed to be done in a particular fashion. So in our teachings and in our practice, when we go out and we harvest from the land, we are replenishing in a fashion that will contribute to that ecosystem's depletion of the resource that we shared. And policy shapers. Now, these are some pictures of very modern day references of all of these practices, but they directly relate to the soil health of our populations. And there were laws established in place in 1492 and earlier, where there were particular people within our community that handled the food and that prepared the food. We had food safety standards in place for the safety of our people and for the safety of our production practices, and knowing that how we were shaping our food system is directly going to impact our health. And today, we're still engaging in the influence of that policy. And the Intertribal Agriculture Council gets to be a component of all of the work that I am talking about here. So we are a national nonprofit organization. We were actually established through an act of Congress. Not very many nonprofits can say that. As a result of the 1987 report that indicated historically underserved communities of Indian country need elevated access to disaster assistance when natural disaster strikes. The reason being there had been this historical underservice by the United States Department of Agriculture. And so this kind of shows the timeline of how we established our programs. Currently, we're working with youth through our professional development efforts to ensure we're training that next generation and offering the mentorship that's needed so that they can take ownership in their role as land stewards. We have a technical assistance network that employs skilled specialists all across the country that meet our producers where they are at. And we help them identify their objectives, and we do what it takes to get them from point A to point B, really serving as a translator between USDA programs and other opportunities and the producers. Because NRCS, FSA, all of our agency friends, they speak with alphabet soup. It's hard to understand the opportunities that are available, the deadlines, but then there's also some opportunity for late applications. You know, it gets confusing trying to navigate in the space of USDA, and we understand that. And we understand that a producer's life cycle, along with the growing cycle, could always use some support in trying to marry those opportunities with the potential of their operation. And then we have our American Indian Foods program, which is the ultimate goal, getting each of our producers out of the commodity ag cycle into the value-added food production cycle. Because when we have our producers that are reconnected with the consumers that are actually eating their product, we are healing our food system. And our American Indian Foods program is designed to support our producers on capitalizing on the niche market prices through our foreign ag service agreements for export readiness and getting our product all around the world, so that they can bring that economic benefit back into their communities. We are engaged in policy work from resource management to market establishment and development to the federal improvement and access of federal funding dollars by our tribal nations and individual Indian producers. And the cool part about it, and I'm just about done here, is when we are able to fill this void and really just serve as a pollinator in the space of ecosystem function, we see some amazing things blossom as a result of healing our food system. When COVID hit in March of 2020, we were contacted by our extension agents all across the country, and they said, hey, we're in a bind here. We have youth who have been taking care of their livestock show animal for the entire year, and they have all of this feed, all of this time. We're not going to be able to have an art auction in which they can make back their money and put some money in savings for the college fund or toward the next animal. And we don't know what we're going to do. So the IAC was able to band together with our partners to establish the Food for Families initiative. And we offered a processing coupon, which made the animal a more appealing purchase for any random consumer to buy the animal that would be processed for them, and then be able to, bring home meat instead of bringing home a 1,200-pound show steer. What we found, though, when we made this available is 21% of our youth decided that they wanted to feed their own family the animal that they had raised. We had 61% that were interested in becoming young entrepreneurs and increasing their local meat supply by just directly distributing their meat locally. And then 18% of our youth applicants chose to donate their meat to feed elderly and early childhood education health care centers. So we saw our youth, our youngest generation, rise up as the next leaders of our food system. And they did just a beautiful job showcasing what can be done when we work together to identify solutions. I believe I'm to the end of my time, so I will go ahead and pass it over.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. That was so informative. At this time, we're going to move to Mrs. Earcine Evans of Francis Flowers and Herbs Farm. Miss Earcine, you're on mute. There, yes.
Did I get it?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Well, I am Earcine Evans, and I'm the owner of Francis Flowers and Herb Farm, Sine All Natural Hair and Skincare Products, and also the owner of our Biodynamic Training Institute, where we teach children and other farmers how to farm the way we farm. And I really want to talk about how I got started here on the land, and you can see it in the back of me. I've been on this land since I was a child. I left it when I was 19. I moved back to the land about 17 years ago to continue what my ancestors started. Because when I grew up, we totally, 90% of our food came from the land. So we was just really self-sufficient. And I wanted to get back to that. And so that's one of the reasons I came back to the land, is just to get back to a simple way of living. When I came back to the land, it had not been touched for over 30 years. My grandfather had passed about 6 years after I came back. And so I had a lot of work to do. Although my grandfather was not a chemical farmer, the land was left bare and no one was taking care of it. And land really need to have someone present to take care of it, because, you know, we are the steward of the earth. So I began my journey about 17 years ago of really just taking care of the land again. And how we chose to do it was through biodynamic farming. We found that that method of farming was replenishing and giving back to the earth the same as what our ancestors did. Because when I grew up in the 50s and the 60s, at least 90% of our food we grew ourselves. We were so self-sufficient. And I wanted to see that happen again in my community. So coming back home, seeing the farms desolate, and very few people had gardens, it really broke my heart. So I made a promise to myself that I would just start farming and eventually would be able to train young people in particular, how, you know, to get back to a healthier time. Well, so it's what I found in my community, that so many people was like extremely unhealthy. And that because they was buying most of all of their food from the store. And as we know, most of the commercialized food is just filled with chemicals. So, you know, watching people health go downhill because of that. And then I know for sure, unless we get back to a natural way of farming the way we used to, that nothing was going to change in our community. So after 17 years of being here and living on this land, I've saw phenomenal results in my health, my husband's health, just for being here, taking care of the land, and my community around me. My grandmother was an herbalist and my great aunt was a midwife. So a lot of their practices, I learned from them, and I started applying those in my herbs, in the way I farm, in the way that I assisted people in my own community. And then I saw a lot of people really responding to me and respecting what I had done. So just really showing people that at one time we were self-sufficient in our community. We knew how to take care of ourselves. If we needed some medicine, we had the herbs there to support us in every area of our life. If a woman was conceived a child, the midwives in the area knew how to really take care of her. And they would take care of her from the land, because we would eat the food that we grew on the land that didn't have pesticides or chemicals. I don't remember anyone who had a garden in my community ever using any pesticides or chemicals on their garden. They would utilize their animals, what they had on the land. Animal waste was always what we used as fertilizers. I remember my grandparents would use chicken manure, you know, horse manure. They would use the cow manure, but they knew how to take that manure, you know, and let it set over the winter in their gardens. And the next year they would turn everything over. And it was just amazing to see how the food would just taste so really great. I mean, the food was just great. And it was amazing because during that time, most people that I knew the children didn't have a lot of health problems. They was not diabetics. I don't remember anyone when I was coming along that was a child that was a diabetic or that had high blood pressure. You know, normally, we always thought of that as happening to someone the older they got. We didn't know why they got it, but I just knew as children that was not happening. Most of the children I knew was really, really healthy. And I know now it's because they was eating garden fresh food. Their food was not filled with chemicals and pesticides on them at all. So my whole goal is just to train and educate my community in particular to get back to that way of living, to return back to the earth and nurture it and take care of it, give back to nature more than we take. And that's how we are going to really educate and empower our communities to be healthy again and to utilize the herbal medicine that grows in our backyard. We have enough medicine growing in our backyard to prevent most things that are happening to us. You know, there's plenty of mullein that grows. It's good for all kind of lung problem that, or like this time of year is spring. There's tons of herbs like yellow root that's growing that people can take to even clean their system out during this time of year, because it's springtime, it's time for us to clean. So everything we need, there's a plant in this earth that would take care of us. And I'm really encouraging and people to get back to that way of living, to return back to the way, especially in my community, I tell people the way we grew up. You know, we did not grow up eating food filled with chemicals. That's not how we grew up. The reason why we were so healthy is because we did eat food that was grown without pesticides or chemicals. And we always knew how to plant our food. We always planned according to the moon cycle. My grandfather could not read or he could not write, but he knew how to plant food. This was something that was inherited in him. This is something that his ancestors brought over from Africa to this country, that it was innate in him to do this. He knew he had the intelligence because he was connected to the land. So we really need to just get that connection back, especially in the rural communities where I live is very rural. We need to connect people back to nature, and nature itself will teach them how to take care of themselves. Once we connect back to the land, take care of the land, nurture the land, respect the land, love the land, do the prayers we used to do for the land. And that land is going to take care of us and make sure that we are healthy also. So I'm really encouraging people to do that. I have received a grant this year to teach K through 12 and include some farmers, at least 10 at least grown-up farmers and K through 12 children. We are training over 40 youth. The Boys and Girls Clubs is included. Mr. Head, which has a community project, and Twila is included, to teach them how to farm the way we farm. So that's how we're spreading the word in our community, is by teaching our youth to return back to a natural way of living, but showing them how to do that and being an example for them, being right there with them, working side by side with our youth, because that's what it's going to take. You know, a community working side by side with our young people, because once we do, our young people really are going to start really wanting to farm, and that way we'll produce more young people that is farming. And even if they don't farm, they're going to want to have a garden. Everyone in the rural community should have a garden. There shouldn't be anyone, and especially in the rural community, without a garden. I want to see that happen across the rural communities, for more of us to train the young people so they can start gardening again. We should have a garden in everyone's backyard who lives in the rural South, in particular, should have a garden in their backyard. And to recognize and identify the herbs that grows around them, because we have lots and lots of herbs that grows right around us. Like the dandelion right now is going to start coming up. There's a liver cleanse. It cleanses the liver off. So people need to know about that. They need to know that they can go out in their yard, and I always encourage people to please, you know, don't use herbs if you have sprayed Roundup or chemicals in your yard. But if not, go out there and make dandelion tea, put dandelions in your salad. There's so many things growing out there right now. Chickweed is everywhere. You can put that in your salad. So we need to start utilizing the wild plants, because the wild plants has God's original signature in it. The wild plants will heal you faster, better than anything that you can ever cultivate. So we need to learn to, they use the word foraging now. We really need to get back to that. We did that as children. The wild onions right now are coming up. Wild garlic is everywhere, wild onions. You know, it's a good time with all the allergies is to go out and pick those and put those in your salad. That builds your immune system up. Your immune system would get built up much faster if you would go outside right now, get some dandelion, get some wild onions, And that's going to help with all the allergies, especially when the bees start coming out and everything start getting pollinated. And you go outside and you eat that food, that wild food that is pollinated already. That's going to help your immune system better than anything that you could ever do right now. So I really encourage people to do that. Felicia, I don't know how much more time I have.
You're good, Ms. Earcine. You got a little over 4 minutes left.
Okay, so what I want to say to everyone in this period of time is please get in your community, get back to a more natural way of life, learn your wild crafted food that is growing right around you. Eat a lot of wild food, eat as much as wild food as you possibly can, because that's going to build your immune system up for summer. It's going to make your immune system so much stronger. And teach our children to identify the wild foods. Everything don't have to be cultivated that you do yourself. If you can have 40% of your food wild and it grows around you and your herbs are growing right there where you can go pick them, then utilize that. Utilize that. Everything do not have to be cultivated. I would love to see us return to eating more wild food. It is very beneficial, very good for us, very high in vitamins and minerals. And wild herbs is better than going out taking vitamins. If you do wild herbs, they're loaded with, and especially if the herbs came from really good fertile soil, they're loaded with vitamins and minerals. So we should utilize more of our food from the land, more of the wild food, so we won't have to take so many supplements. Let your food be your medicine. Thank you so much, Felicia, for having me on. I really appreciate being here.
Yes, ma'am. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for questions and comments of both presenters. And we definitely will follow up with that if we have time at the end, but keep in mind, we will definitely have a part 2 of this on March 31st to make sure everyone get their answers to their questions and be able to just to have a longer conversation. At this time, we're going to move to Mila Berhane. I know her as Mila, short, and she's representing Greenhand Nursery. And I definitely let her explain also her other role. Mila, can you come forward?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. It is an honor to be talking about my culture. I'm from the South. We are the people from Mexico up to Central America. So that is our roots. And I always give talks about agriculture, but this is the very first time I'm talking about the indigenous methods of agriculture. So let's start. And so what I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk about different topics, which is soil conservation, terraces, plant with the season, seed savings, intercropping, and la milpa. Even though it's different topics, but everything brings us back to earth. As you know, all the indigenous communities all over, this earth is very important. Soils are sacred, is Mother Earth. I think the holiday or the word that we know more over here is Pachamama, which is very important holiday all over Latin America with the indigenous communities. The Pachamama Day is celebrated on August 1st, which is the day for Mother Earth. Now, I'm from El Salvador, which is in Central America. And in El Salvador, there is a holiday, which is on May the 3rd, which is named Dia de la Cruz, which is the Day of the Cross. And it's a tribute to Mother Earth. And it celebrates the beginning of the rainy season. usually May the 3rd is the day when the corn is planted. And so all the crops for that season are planting on that day. It is called the Day of the Cross because, as you might know, the Spanish brought Catholic religion, so the native tribes, they compromised, and so we kept the same indigenous traditions mixed with Catholic Church. So all over Latin America, mostly is very, we have the type of soils is a volcanic soils. And here I brought these numbers, which is alarming. It say that 95% of the food consumed come from the soil and 33% of global soils are degraded, which is in general. These numbers are coming from the soils atlas for Latin America and the Caribbean. It said erosion affects 75% of the land in El Salvador. Now, to start with, El Salvador is the smallest country in Latin America, in Central America, and with the highest population. So there is very scarcity of good soil. Agriculture, which had decreased substantially in the 1990s, continues to play an important role in the economy as it employs 25% of the country's labor force. Coffee and sugar, of course, are the main crops, and which is, it takes most of the land. At this time, we still have small farmers, which are also the indigenous people that keep the traditional ways of agriculture. Of course, with the new type of agriculture is a constant fight in order to keep the traditions. 68% of soil in South America is affected by erosion, you see, compared to the 75 in El Salvador. So you see how 100 million hectares of land have been degraded as a result of deforestation. And that's another problem again, because the deforestation most of the time come either for fuel is used for fuel consumption, and of course is clear in order to more development. So here are some of the practices. Conservation terraces is something very important and is practiced all over Central America because of the topography. Terraces are created to have plots of flat land in order to plant it and to stop soil erosion. You see right here, it's very common. These people live right here in this small hutch, and then they have a small plot of land. But this traditionally has been used. Terraces right here, you can see the tomato plants, and you see right here retaining. And those are the principles are used in order to stop the erosion. Without the terraces, there will be more loss of soil and water. These are some examples of a bigger piece of land. As you see over here, also, I think he is planting, and what is so beautiful is the wisdom that they use in order to plant. You have over here some vegetables, and you have a retain right here in between rows. Something that is used very traditional is intercropping. And over here we have yucca plants, which they are very common. They are using like fences because they will also help stopping the erosion. It's very common to have fruit trees right there, and you can see the contour right there in order to protect the land. Now, if you see in this picture, look what happened when there is no taking care of the land. All this is erosion right there. Probably they went to try to plant something, and this is what happened. Mostly happened, all those landslides happen during the very rainy season. Now, I'm talking about the native people from Central America, my people. I grew up in a very small farming town, which is one of the few places where it still is the majority are natives. But here, my husband is from Eritrea. And so last year we went to his farm and you see the same principles. It's incredible. This is a potato field. And look how they plant right here in order to stop the erosion. So it doesn't matter where we are, the indigenous communities, they always protect the land. I brought this example because I don't remember hearing in the United States this case of the little guy against the giant. So when we talk about the diversity, something that is very important is keeping our own seed to keep that biodiversity. Of course, when I'm talking about the small farmers, these people, they have to save the seed. They don't have the monies to go and buy every year all the seed from the store. In the first place, there are not too many stores that will carry those seeds. The genetic diversity helps to maintain the food supply and help species survive and adapt to the environmental changes. And it still is done. I grew up with this tradition. You take the seeds and they save it, and they were saving them in wood ashes in order to preserve them from the insect damage. But what is important is this example that happened in El Salvador. Monsanto was pushing for them to buy the GMO seed varieties. And of course, in order to afford for this seed, they had to take a loan and buy the seed and buy all the chemicals. So all these small farmers, they united and they start fighting Monsanto. And guess what? They end up winning. So the Ministry of Agriculture, they created this program, the Family Agriculture Program. They allow them to save their seeds. And they prove to Monsanto their seeds, their native seeds are more, they are just more and they're producing better. So at the very end, right now, it's still those farmers are saving their own seeds. Like in the previous picture, the one I show you, these are some pumpkins I grew. And so I've been saving seeds right here in the States for the last 20, 25 years. So every year, these are native pumpkins. So I save my seeds, and these are some of the seeds also that they are saving right there. So they end up producing 50% of corn seed supply and 8% come from native seeds. That's a big win, compared to fight the big guys. Okay, so other problems is, for example, the availability of water. In the tropics, there are two seasons, is the dry season and the rainy seasons. And so unless you have like a pond or something, you are going to be able to grow during the dry season. It's extremely, well, it used to be extremely dry. Now it seems like things are changing, but traditionally you plant from May to October. October is really start getting dry. And of course, as you know, September, October is hurricane season, so you get affected too by the wind, so it's very hard to plant. But something that is happening right now, on 2020, it was so rainy through the whole time when it's supposed to be dry. So the weather is changing, and the planting patterns are also changing. It might be good sometimes, but also, with the climate change, everything is going to, we have to adjust to all those changes right there. Here is another example. And so like this is very traditional to do intercropping. And And this is one of the most traditional examples is, as I mentioned earlier, coffee is one of the cash crops. And so traditionally what is done is planted in different levels. Coffee, because it's from the higher lands, it needs some shade. It doesn't grow in full sun. So what they do, these are the coffee trees. And so what they do, they plant higher, taller trees, which is usually are fruit trees or for wood. Mostly they plant kind of fast growing trees in order to use them for firewood. And on the bottom right here, then you have your vegetables and your vine and everything growing right there. I grew up, when I was growing up, again, there was not too much use of artificial fertilizers. So one that it has so much value was when all these leaves that were decaying, they have the time when they were able to pull some from the land and even sell it as a fertilizer. And it still is a practice that is done very much. And of course, one of the main examples, and I think we all are familiar, is with the Three Sisters system. Of course, we don't call it the Three Sisters, it's La Milpa. And so what La Milpa means is a Nahuatl word. This is the language that my people used to speak. And so that means several crops or polyculture, and it makes use of the land and conserving it. The origin, of course, it traced back to Mesoamerica, which is from Mexico all the way to Central America. And so I think everybody is familiar with the Three Sisters system, which is corn, beans, squash, and of course you add up also greens in the ground. It can be amaranth, it can be whatever edible greens, medicinal plants. So everything is included right there. So this is an intercropping, and it's amazing to know the wisdom of these communities, to know that they were using the soil, but they were conserving it too, because it was a full balance on the nutrition and taking care of the land. So here you have an example. This is my relative. It has been, just you can see the example right here. This is the Three Sister garden. It has been planted right there. And you see the intercropping again. You have some fruit trees. You have the corn is planted right there. And if you see in between, this is a newly planted garden. So this is getting ready. So I assume this garden was planted, this time might be around maybe the end of May or something like that, because by the time, by probably July and August, this is going to be time to harvest by then. And so that was my presentation, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mila. So much good information. And thanks again for everyone chiming in on the chat. Our last speaker is Twila, Cassadore. And let me pull up Twila's information. Are you all able to see this? Yes?
Yes.
Great, thank you. You can start, Twila.
Okay, first I'd like to take a very small moment of silence to honor our elders and our knowledge keepers, seed keepers, and our ancient ones. So with that, I'm just gonna ask everyone just for a moment of silence. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. Twila Cassadore, St. Carlos Apache Tribe, Bunchling. My name is Twila Cassadore. I am a tribal member of the St. Carlos Apache Tribe, in southeastern Arizona, and I reside on the San Carlos Apache Reservation. I presently am a cultural project assistant for the San Carlos Apache tribe, and also working with the Western Apache Diet project, which I'm going to be showing right now. We're going to go through a few slides. We're going to go to the first slide. And with this first slide, what I'm going to do is share a small story, an Apache story, and it's just going to all come together as we go through the rest of the slide. This is our creation story that I'm going to share, and this is a summary of it. And Nayenesgani, he is the first Apache man in our culture. And Nayenesgani was growing into manhood. First off, Nayenesgani is the son of the sun. And as he was growing into adulthood, his father showed him two worlds. And one world was a beautiful, colorful world full of plant, agaves, nuts, berries, streams, and abundant with greens and wildlife and birds and many species. Then we're going to go to the second slide. And then his father showed him another world, which is a brown world, which showed cattle, horses, pigs, metal, manufactured goods. So we're going to go to the third slide. So of course, his father asked him which of these worlds does he want to live on as he's growing into this stage of his life. And of course, his son said this colorful world. And it was full. Next slide. And again, this is our desert agave. Next slide is the wild game. So as his father handed him this world, there's another part of the story that goes with it. But basically, at the end of it, he ended up living on this world. And what he was told that this world does not belong to us as Indigenous people, it belongs to, we belong to the land, and we are the caretakers of the land, and that we are to manage the land. So next slide. Okay, I think we're missing a slide. Where did I go? Go a slide above that one. There we go. Above. There we go, right there. Okay, thank you. And so just going along with that story, we're talking about today's health disparities that we're facing in Indian country. And a lot of it is that disconnection with the land. So speaking with elders throughout time, one of the best quotes we've ever heard was, if people ate their Apache foods and exercised, there would be none of these new sicknesses. If people respected themselves, respected the land, this country would be beautiful again. And that was by the late Wallace Johnson. And the next slide. So working with this project, which is the Western Apache Diet Project, is representing this diet in a meaningful way for use by community members, tribal programs, education, and health professionals. Determine readily obtainable equivalents to hard to access wild foods to replicate today as close as possible the pre-reservation diet. Using this information to develop policies, programs which support adapting healthy, traditional-based diets and lifestyles of the Arizona Apache Reservation. Next slide. So in today's world, we actually see an epidemic of physical health problems, and most are diet related, and it's not having access to those healthy foods like we would like to. And it's also social issues has led to most of the physical illnesses and disease of the Apache Reservation. So next slide. Okay. So with their history, you're gonna look at when the reservation was first developed. People were taken away from the land and unable to forage and harvest from the land like they traditionally were able to, and put into a landscape and relocated to a small area where they no longer had access to land. And being that disconnect from land has really caused a lot of trauma in people, not being able to afford, not being able to support their families and so forth. So many things have transitioned in spite of that, or in despite of that. So we're going to go to today's diet. Next slide. So you go to any grocery store on the reservations, basically, you will find food that are low in fiber, high in saturated fats, low in healthy fats, high in cholesterol, high in sodium and added sugars, and very high in processed foods. Okay, next slide. 18% of our population has been diagnosed with diabetes, type 2, actually probably a lot higher than what we were saying. Hypertension, cardiovascular disease, much higher than the national average. A complete shift from the 1950s when people were completely really engaged with the land. Over half of the population is overweight, obese, including 49% of the children. Next slide. And these are some of the diseases that are related to obesity. So you can read through some of those, you know, coronary heart disease, strokes, enlarged heart, high cholesterol, diabetes, and you see a list of things that has occurred, and a lot of it is just not being reconnected with the land. Next slide. So these are also cancers associated with the obesity, the lung, breast, colon, pancreatic, stomach, esophageal, and going down those lists of illnesses that occurs from the diet. So we're going to the next slide. Elders tell us that most of our physical health problem would disappear or diminish if we ate our traditional Apache food and exercise as much as we did in pre-reservation time. Elders tell us that most of our social problems, including depression, suicide, substance abuse, sexual violence, are tied to our forced break from traditional practices, especially food and food production, and that solutions to these problems must begin with physically reconnecting with the land and the practices and giving our people something meaningful to do all day, every day. Since 2011, we have created a database of information on the traditional Apache diet compiled from over 20 years of interviews with the Apache elders from the 4 Arizona Apache reservations, and from extensive literature searches of published and unpublished sources. Conducted and analyzed information on traditional Apache food from over 100 interviews with Apache elders and traditional cultural authorities. These elders were basically in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And being very selective of these elders was one way was the elders were raised by their grandparents, not their parents. So they had a very close connection and tie to the land and those practices. Detailed information regarding close to 300 food species, compiled 96 8 per month sample pre-reservation Apache daily menus for nutritional analysis. Okay, next slide. And the project nutritionist is currently creating a detailed database of the nutritional content and value of over 150 traditional plant species for academic sources, noting values of calories, protein, total fats, and all that good stuff that goes in there. And I really envy that job. I do. I would love to know each of those vital nutrients, micronutrients, and macronutrients, all these beautiful things that come with all the what's growing around us. And compiling nutritional information on the macronutrients and micronutrients found in the Apache food. Okay. Next slide. So these are some of the project findings for many people that really love numbers. This is, a really great source to go to, and this should be completed in a few years, but it will be completed, and most of it is pretty much done. And that's where all the traditional plant food that grows within the 4 locations of the Apache tribes. Okay, next slide. And project findings, overview of the diet. In pre-reservation times, Apache were highly mobile, seasonally following traditional food sources within our home territories throughout the year. We harvested wild foods from a wide range of ecosystems and elevations from 2,000 to 10,000 feet. Maintained agricultural fields at prescribed locations. Our diet was highly diversified, so we were able to withstand widely varying climatic conditions. Okay. Before the reservation, wild plant food made up about 40–60% of the total diet. Agricultural food made up 20 to 50% of the total diet. Wild meat made up 20 to 40% of the total diet. The most important individual foods by volume in the traditional diet were the roasted agave hearts, which are becoming up this summer, emery oak acorns, wild seeds, primarily sunflower family, mustards, grasses, corn, and meat. Okay, next slide. See, there are over 200 documented Apache edible wild plant species comprising of green, seeds, nuts, fruits, tubers, stalks, fungi, and minerals and flowers. Our traditional agriculture centered on several species of several varieties of corn, a few varieties of squash, and rarely beans because beans was introduced. We ate about 30 species of mammals, mostly rodents by volume, 9 main species of birds, supplemented by several species of songbirds. Next slide. The Apache diet was extremely healthy. I mean, it was so extremely healthy. It was high in fiber, low in saturated fat, high in healthy fats, low in cholesterol, low in sodium, sugar, rich and wide variety of the whole foods filling with very little volume. And like other presenters were speaking about how people used to eat healthy before, you know, this whole industry came and so many things have changed. And so many areas have disconnected from the land. And again, going back to the traditional diet is seasonal in nature. The diet varied according to the season, tying individuals and the whole community to the natural order of seasons in terms of nutrition, activity, and economy and ceremony. It was always something different every day. It was never the same. And I always tell people it's never Taco Tuesday. The production was the basis of traditional Apache activity and movement, economy, ceremony, and political structure. But imagine having a leader that was based on the knowledge of how to take care and feed the family, how to feed your community. And that's what people were chosen long ago. Following wild plant harvest drove the community's movement throughout the year and consume most day-to-day activity. Food and food gathering was the basis of the traditional economy. The origins and timings of food is the base or key component of most ceremonies. Political leaders were chosen largely by their ability to anticipate, organize, and administer a food production system and activities. The traditional Apache relationship with food is deeply personal, respectful, and spiritual. The holy people, Negosan, food, plant, and animals, and Autanic Astoto Gojo are all interconnected. I know we are on a soil panel for this discussion somewhat, and we're looking at the traditional aspects. I'm going to speak on myself, my own experience, and we're going to just stay at that previous slide that has a picture. Yes, we'll stay there for a moment. I'm going to speak mostly about myself. I have been in, I've been clean, alcohol and drug free, 19 years this June. And like this earth, you just fall into a world of, oh, I want to try that. And then you just realize it wasn't the best thing to try in the world. And then somehow you tend to get stuck doing all those things. And I went on, I believe, about a 30-year journey on that road. And I always tell people that was 150 pounds ago. I had my elders take me out to the landscape and just be with the land and be able to forage and harvest and to make beautiful baskets without telling me, saying, we're going to take you to a wellness center, or we're going to prescribe you this medication. What they did was fed me and took me to places that my ancestors were from. Being in those places rooted me, had this big void inside of me, and I just couldn't fill that void. And I would find it with the most negative things in life to fill this void for many, many years. And it's also talking about depression, talking about attempted suicide, talking about so many negative things that approaches people in life. Being out there with the land healed me without putting me into a facility, without putting me on medication, without words. And it just embraced me. And for my part, was sharing that with people is also the healing of sexual violence. As a small child, before I was even 5, I've encountered that, and it traumatized my entire life. That led me to a world that I never understood and never felt loved and felt completely lost. And the people that worked with me were my elders, and they knew that story, but we were like, shh, you don't talk about it. It's taboo. But we need to talk about it in order to heal and move forward. And it's the same with Mother Earth. Shh. We can extract and eliminate many of this land site. It's not going to hurt her. She's silent. She's not going to say what's hurting her. And it's not respecting her also. That she's asking us to help her heal. She's not going to ask us to help her heal. In the same sense, I feel the trauma that I've experienced. I never asked for help. I just let things happen, and it got worse. And I'm thankful to be here. I'm thankful to be here, to be sharing my story. I'm thankful to be part of this beautiful, amazing project, which is called the Western Apache Diet Project, that we continually work with here in the St. Carlos Apache tribe with many other programs and reintroducing people to the land. And I think I lost my slide here. Okay, I don't see a slide, I see an invoice.
Yes, sure this is our QR code for our CEU tracking. We needed to put it up 3 minutes for the end, but
oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I want to share that what we do with the project is reconnecting people to land, and it's important for people to heal in order for the land also to heal. So with that, I'd like to say thank you again. My name is Twila. I'm with the Western Apache Diet Project out of St. Carlos, Arizona. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Wow. We appreciate every single speaker. This was so full to be able to learn the Indigenous practices, and this is what this session was for. And so we definitely want you to join us March 31st at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. It's NCAT's Gulf States Regional Office weekly Wednesday workshop. We will have these ladies on again because we want to expand this. We want to continue the conversation, but of course we have to stay within our time frame today for the conference. So we just appreciate each and every one of these powerful women and their background, and thank them so much for sharing their story with us. This has been the Indigenous and Traditional Soil Health Practice panel. We thank everyone for joining us. And I believe we could go to the next session, and our CEU tracking number and all of that information is on the screen at this time for those participants. Thank you so much. Twila, Miss Earcine, Mila, and Kelsey, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.